Hey, everybody, this is Lawrence Watkins, and I'm here with Al Duncan, and we're the co founders of Great Pro Speakers, where we aim to teach you the truth about professional speaking. So, Al, it's been a while. It's good to see you again, sir, live and on, I
Yes,
won't say in person, but I guess we're hundreds and thousands of miles apart, right?
that's right. But I mean, it's close enough. Still same
Yeah.
energy.
So, yeah, still the same energy, still the same energy. So, Al, what are we talking about today?
Today we're going to be talking about how to tell money-making stories. Now, there's always telling great stories, which should be part of any speaker's arsenal. It should be part of your repertoire. But just because you tell a good story or a great story does not mean your story will help you make money. So there's a very important distinction there.
Yeah, yeah. So let's just jump right into it and talk about why
Okay.
stories are actually important. So why do you think stories are important for a professional speaker?
Well, I mean, stories are important not just for professional speakers, but for any profession. They help build rapport. There's an expression in sales that is facts tell and stories sell. So stories help sell your message, help sell your abilities, they help sell your products and your services. And people have an easier time remembering stories than they do remembering all the facts and different things and great information that you've given them. So stories are very important. They're the things that travel. As your brand travels, usually it's your personal story or some aspect of a story you told that travels with it. And so stories are crucial to any professional speaker. It doesn't matter what your particular audience or your target market is.
Yeah, yeah. And one of the things that one of my friends keeps telling me over and over again is when it comes to selling, when people make buying decisions, they make buying decisions based off of emotion and then
Hmm.
justify their buying decision based off of logic. And
Yep.
the way to get people emotionally invested in terms of what it is that you're saying is coming up with good, compelling stories that
Hmm.
actually relate to them.
Yep. I
Uh,
agree with that.
yeah, yeah. So I guess my next question would be when it comes to that, uh, what are I guess, the general types of purposes of a story that you can actually tell?
So the general purpose of a story, it
Yeah,
could
yeah.
be a couple different things. Your story could be designed to endear you or engage the audience. In other words, it's part of having a great presentation or a great keynote speech or whatever. So that's one point of your story. It helps. It's kind of like the whole thread that binds everything together. There's always an expression: you tell a story, you make a point. You tell a story, you make a point. So stories. That's one purpose of stories. Now, the other important aspect of stories, especially for professional speakers, is to highlight, showcase your abilities, which is going to then help you to sell and move people to action. As a
Hmm.
professional speaker, not just a good public speaker, as a
Hmm.
professional speaker, you got to be able to sell and move people to action. Otherwise, you don't get any more gigs and you don't sell any products and you can't push any of your services. So the purpose of a story that we want to focus on is the part about selling and moving people to action.
Yeah, and that selling piece is so critically important
Yeah.
because what you find in the speaking industry a lot of times, and this is the actual reason why we created greatprospeakers.com in the first place,
Hmm.
is because a lot of speakers focus so much on the first part of like making yourself, endearment to the audience,
Yeah.
engaging the audience, that type of thing, which is really important because that's where the audience gets a lot of value out of in terms of that emotional connection with you. But they
Yeah.
often forget the second part, and the second part is for you to sell products in the back of the room.
Hmm.
In addition to that, work on getting your next gig at the same time. So
Yeah.
when it comes to the purposes of story, I find that the best way to do it is to combine both of them in
Yes.
some type of speech or presentation to where you are doing those stories that engage slash endear yourself to the audience, but then you also sell yourself on future engagements as well.
Yeah, I agree. Normally, if a person has a great story, we can just tweak it a little to say, you know what, let's add this line in here, or let's add this, let's give somebody else a voice right here so that it helps to move people to action or helps them to helps you to sell a product or help people helps to let people know that you can be brought in to speak to another audience or a different audience. Sometimes that's all it is. You just got to tweak your stories because your story should serve a dual process. I agree with you all the time. And when I first started speaking, I was lost on that because I was after I need the audience to clap, man. I need y'all to say, my dad was a preacher, so I'm like, look, I need y'all to do something, give me some energy back or whatever is going on. So this is how I would tell my story, so that people would be engaged and get, and do that whole call and response with me and be laughing. And I knew my story was humorous and things of that nature. But I remember the first time I got a standing ovation, I was excited, man. I'm told good stories, and I got a standing ovation. I went to the back of the room and everybody said, "You did a great job." And they kept right on walking past me and my table and all the books and products I had back there. And that was with a ton of glowing testimonials and everything. And that's when I realized I need to go do some studying on how to really sell from the stage and make sure that my stories move people to action and drive them, and drive sales for my business.
Right. So for those who are just tuning in, this is Lawrence Watkins. I'm here with Al Duncan, and we're the co-founders of Great Pro Speakers, where we teach you the truth about professional speaking. Today, we're talking about how to create money-making stories. Right. So as professional speakers, a lot of times you have people telling stories, but they aren't really told in a way that actually gets them that next gig or it gets them that book sale after the event. So that's what we're actually talking about today. So we've talked about the general purposes of a story, right? Now let's talk a little bit more in terms about how do you go about telling good stories to your audience?
Yeah. So of course, before we really hone in on let's put the sales aspect to it and the part that drives action. This the basic format of telling a story that I'm always coming back around telling anybody, especially if you're not used to telling stories or you don't know how to tell one or really get your story to be clear, concise, and compelling. I always say, do what they taught you in career development, what they teach you in job when you're preparing for a job interview, and that is use the STAR method. And we talked about that on another one of these videocast podcasts, also, Lawrence, and that is the STAR method. That is situation, task, action, and result. Just tell them the situation, tell them what you were doing, tell them the task, that is exactly what you had to do or what you were supposed to accomplish, and show them the action that you took, what steps did you take, and then give them the result. Show them that I actually got something done based on that. So that's a basic format for telling a story that will make your story at least stay on point, like I said, and keep it clear, concise, and compelling, and give it a good chance to be engaging to the audience. So that's the basics right there.
Right. So that's the basis of actually, telling a story.
Right.
Now let's in the STAR method, they even teach that in business school. They teach that everywhere.
They teach it everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. In terms of, how do you go about telling good stories? And the reason they teach is because it's very effective.
Yeah. And it keeps people from wandering all over the place. People start telling the story. You're telling the story. You're supposed to be telling me a story about what you did on your last job. And all of a sudden we end up talking about what happened with your babysitter. Yeah. Like, come on. Nobody cares about that. So if you stick with the situation, task, action, and result. Now, that's just the basics. As a professional speaker, I'm rarely on that. I mean, my letter's all out of order. You couldn't even spell the word STAR. I might tell the situation first. I might tell the action or results first. Sometimes I tell a story about, I mean, back in the mid-90s, I'm sitting outside in front of, in my favorite chair in front of my apartment. Well, what used to be my apartment in the snow. Now, I'm telling you a result right there. I started at the end. I would then go back around to explain the situation that I messed up my money and I got all this crazy stuff. You're
not telling a STAR, you're telling SAR, you're telling RAS, starts. Yeah, you're all over the place with it.
So when I say STAR, I don't mean that good professional speakers don't only stick to that. We tell a story, we start making a little point, then you step out of it, and you might tell a story within a story. But that's just a basic method that you can use to get started to make sure your stories are at least logical, presented in a good manner.
Right. Yeah. So let's dig deeper into that though, because off camera we talked about a few things related to this, and I want to go deeper in terms of like what needs to happen with your story to make it a good story. So we talked about this thing about resistance, right?
Right. Yeah. So a good money-making story it gets rid of resistance. It minimizes resistance. And what I mean by resistance is in any sales process or any motivational process, that is, either I'm trying to get you to buy something, or I'm trying to get you to do something, or I'm trying to persuade you to take action. There's always resistance. There's going to be resistance because it's natural. Human beings, this is what we do. Like, we don't want to go through something that seems like it's very challenging to do, or people are not willing to, instantly change and things of that nature. Resistance is always there. And so as you minimize resistance, human beings, just like electricity, naturally seek the path of least resistance. So the less resistance there is to doing what you're asking them to do, or buying what you want them to buy, the more likely they are to actually buy. So you got to minimize resistance. And when I say resistance, I mean things like people saying, well, I see it work for you, but well, I don't know if I can do that.
Yeah.
Or man, that thing costs how much money? I don't know if it is it really worth that. Or you want me to put you up in front of what audience? Man, how do I know you would actually engage with them or be good with them? Everybody has resistance. Can I do it? Is it for me? Will it work for me? Am I going to be successful at doing this? Does it cost too much money? Is he telling me the truth? How do I know what he's saying works? And things of this nature. What is his expertise? How do I know I can believe him? These are all forms of resistance. And so a good money-making story starts to minimize resistance.
Yeah, and I agree with that 100% in regards to the minimization of like resistance when telling a story. And you actually have a really good story that relates quite substantially to your particular audience in the youth segment and just talking to youth in general.
Yeah.
Tell the audience a little bit about that story.
So initially when I first started telling my story, I would tell a story about my father's difficulty with drugs. He was on drugs, he's a preacher, and he ended up being on smoking crack cocaine. It was crazy, and I told the story because that particular story was devastating to me, and I talked about how I was still able to, after I got myself together, overcome these odds. And even though I was devastated about dealing with my dad, I was devastated but not defeated. I just tell the story all the time, and people could relate to it, and they understood it, and I would get some gigs here and there. But one day I started telling my story of what was going on with my dad, and I slid over into the story about how, even though my father was going through all of this, my mom helped me still get my act together. I was a knucklehead. She still helped me make it to college. And when I went to college, I became a professional saxophone player. Well, as a professional saxophone player, unfortunately, I still had terrible habits. So I was making great money, but I blew all my money. And I got to call you to determine, right? That show you right there. Money don't solve all your problems. Trust me. Okay, sometimes money, what's that expression? More money, more problems. And that's true. So I get a call from my mom, and this is the part of the story I started telling later. And I got a call from my mom. She told me she was worried about my youngest brother. His name is Nate. So she wants me to help out with Nathan. Now I'm embarrassed because I don't have money. I'm the first person in my family to go to college. I'm making all this money, but I had no money. My mom needs help. So I end up selling my saxophone, moving back home to find out what's going on with my little brother. I get home. Life is crazy for him there. We live in Philly. So I said, Mom, we got to get out of this neighborhood, kill him, pack up my stuff. Me and him moved from Philly down to Atlanta, Georgia. And that is where I became a professional chef, eventually an executive chef. And I moved on to have, successful businesses. And now I'm a professional speaker. And also, my little brother today is doing great. He's doing great, lives in Philly, has a house, works for one of the largest hospitals. So he's there and actually runs one of the departments at the hospital. So he's doing good. Now, here's what I found out. When I started telling that story, the story about selling my saxophone to go raise my youngest brother, which story was, I was completely embarrassed. I never wanted to tell anybody that story, man. Who wants to stand up and tell somebody that I was a successful musician, but I had to sell my saxophone? It's embarrassing when I first stood up in front of the audience and told that story. And so what happened is, all of a sudden, even though I told them about what was going on with my dad, those were his problems. When I told a story to the audience about my problems, it created a whole different level of rapport and authenticity with the audience, which immediately got rid of some resistance. And I could almost notice it instantly. People wanted to connect with me more. They would come up to me afterwards and say, what you did with your brother, it was great, man. Or man, Dad, man, it was crazy. What was you doing? You spent all your money. What did you spend your money on? Like, what were you up to, man? So there was a different level of rapport. So I went back and started working on that story. I told the story what was going on with my dad. I would interject that into there to explain how I got around to raising my youngest brother. But I started honing in on selling the saxophone, raising my youngest brother, he and I coming to Atlanta and eventually becoming successful. And it's so many things happen. So it's authenticity happens in there. The other thing that happened in there is that it began to showcase my abilities and what I could do personally with a troubled young person. Okay. So now I'm showcasing my personal brand and my abilities, and I'm showing people without having to say, hey, look, I'll be great in front of your students. You know, I'm telling you, I can help them out. I don't have to say that. I'm showing you how I dealt with a knucklehead teenager over here who was a straight wannabe gangster and was very problematic, you know, and how I was able to deal with him, not as a parent, but as a mentor and as a brother. So that story began to captivate people more. And what I noticed is that people rarely came up to me and said, hey, you know what, that's an interesting story about your dad. I want you to come tell that story to my group to my group of students. They would say, hey, man, that was a great story with your little brother. I would like for you to come talk to my young people and talk to them about that. Or can you come over here to our mentoring group and talk to them about some of the things you talked to your little brother about? So that story, just from a little shift in focus right there, began to make me more money.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because you mentioned, you know, the story resonating with the audience because it was your personal story, and you know, we both agree that, you know, personal stories are definitely the most profitable. But it's also a story that the audience can relate to, because many people in your audience, when you were, you know, speaking to youth, were the same age as your little brother or close to that age, and they could relate to the challenges that, you know, he may have been experiencing.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. They could. And then the teachers and the principals, their parents in the audience, that are like, hey, listen, I'm going through something like that with my child right now, you know, or can you come talk to my niece or my nephew? And I will get people pull me to the side all the time and say, you know what, man, that's a good thing you did. I'm actually taking care of my sister's children right now, you know? And so it is a story that I begin to find out not only relates to people, but when people think about it and they imagine it, they can see various aspects of their life, or someone who they know, they can see various aspects of that person's life in that particular story. And so in sales, once again, they say they do business with you because they know you, they like you, and they trust you. And so people are having a great opportunity to know me by telling this story right here.
Right. You also talked about like the whole third-party verification aspect of, you know, telling a story too. And you know, you told me that piece about what people used to say to you, mothers and other people, so after the event. Tell the audience.
Yeah, I remember the first time a woman came up to me and she said, Al, she said, I like that story you told me. She said, but I want to meet your mom. I said, you want to meet my mom? Why? She said, because I want to talk to her and ask her what in the world she saw in you that was going to let you, and you were doing all this crazy stuff, and she saw enough in you to let you take one of her children to another state, you know, and raise a child. And then I realized that, so basically by telling this story, I also show that my mother had a great deal of trust in my character and my potential, because she knew where I was. She knew what I was doing at that point in time, but she believed in what I could be, and she treated me like what I could be, you know. And so not only did it help push me forward to my little brother, but it also shows people that I have someone here who trusts me with her child. So what does that mean? That means as you're a parent in the audience, you can trust me to help you out with your child. If you are a teacher, that means you can trust me to help you out with your students. Why? Because I got another parent here. It's my mom, but it's still a parent, and this is not my son. And she trusts me enough to feel like I can get my act together, go down there and raise him. And more importantly, I did it. She trusted me, and it worked out well.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, bringing all this back to the purpose of this conversation in regards to money making stories, you know, that sell, right? You know, when it comes to killing that resistance, because that's the overarching theme in regards to this type of story. You know, that story that you told really did three main things, and we talked about this, you know, beforehand. You know, it showed that, you know, you were telling the truth. You know, that's what it showed the audience. It also showed the audience that, you know, you went through something similar, so they could relate to you in some form or fashion. So that's the personability of the story. And also, since you did it, it made the audience feel like they could do it too.
Yep,
right?
especially teens. And so, of course, one of the biggest lines of resistance is, and I don't just mean for selling, I mean getting the audience to actually do something, is they have to believe that they can accomplish it. If a young person looking at you cannot be sitting there thinking the whole time that, well, you know what, you don't relate to me, or nah, that worked for you, but you don't know what I'm going through, or you don't know what I've been through. So you have to find a way to kill this. And that does not mean, I always tell speakers this, that does not mean you had to live the exact same life that he or she did. I mean, I'm talking sometimes you could be talking to a group of young people in juvenile correctional facilities, but I've also been talking to young people way out in Silicon Valley, Palo Alto, that grew up, you know, very wealthy young people with a totally different background from me. And I have to find a way to tell the story so that it still relates to them, because then you start realizing that, well, certain things are universal, like pressure, disappointment, frustration, failure, fear. These things are universal. And so people can understand and see when you're down to earth, and it makes you seem very relatable because you've gone through something similar. Even if it wasn't the exact situation, you've experienced similar emotions, and that definitely helps to drive sales. And like I said, all of this is great for the art of public speaking. But always on greatprospeakers.com, we're talking about helping you make money, okay? And so when you tell a story like this and people can feel like, yes, I can do that, the next natural question for them is, well, if I believe I can do that, now I need to know how to do that. And logically, they're going to come back to see if you have a product, if you have if you got some type of blog or website or somewhere, some type of way I can connect with you so that I can get more information on how to do the things that you're teaching me to do.
Right. And that's the important part of the sales aspect of stories, is
Yes.
moving people through that, journey of belief, getting them from, I can't do this, and, having a lot of resistance about doing something, getting them to believe. And then the next step is getting them to actually take action.
Yeah.
Right.
Take action is the hard part.
Yeah, take action is the hard part. It definitely is the hard part. And just to remind everybody, I'm Lawrence Watkins, and I'm here with Al Duncan, and we're the co-founders of Great Pro Speakers, where we teach you the truth about professional speaking. Of course, I'm also Boyce's younger brother, and I also run Boyce Watkins Enterprises for him when he's not around. So thanks for joining us today, guys. So, we have one more main question to kind of get through today.
Wait, before you get that one, Lawrence, hold on. I want to say this because while I'm talking to professional speakers and we're talking about making sure that we teach somebody that you can do this. So let me pause for a second, because it never fails whenever I'm talking to speakers about stories and what story should I tell, and how do I know the audience is going to relate to my story, or my story is not that unique, or it's not like yours, Al, and X, Y, and Z. What I am telling you is, whoever you are, whatever your background is, whatever your expertise is, whatever your main target market that you want to speak to, I can tell you that more than likely there is a speaker similar to you that has managed to make 6 figures a year in that area. And in other words, your story will work. You don't need a story like somebody else. You don't always have to have a tragic story or you overcome all the circumstances. You don't even need that. I mean, it's great if you have one, but you don't always have to have that. There are tons of successful speakers with all types of story. There isn't any type of story that I haven't seen that can be successful when and if it's put together correctly, told correctly. And if you use these different elements and these principles that we're giving you, you will have a story that captivates the audience and helps to sell and move them to action.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. And I struggle with that too a little bit back in the day. It's like, well, is my story even that interesting?
Right.
But over time, I feel comfortable, more comfortable in my own skin and what I've accomplished, and just my journey in terms of being an entrepreneur at a young age, and traveling now and doing a lot of other things. That the stories now come out a little bit more naturally, and I have more confidence in myself when telling the story, because I think that's a really big aspect of it too, is you have to actually, to make the audience believe, you're going to have to believe too.
You got to believe, you're right.
Yeah, believe in yourself. And, that reminds me of when I first got into sales and started, selling Boyce for speaking engagements back in 2006. I couldn't believe that people were making $10,000 or $5,000 or whatever, just to get up there and speak for an hour. Like that was just outside of my comprehension in my view. So in the beginning with Great Black Speakers, my original company, it was hard. It was very hard to sell that concept of Great Black Speakers because I didn't believe in the story myself. So it
Right.
wasn't until I actually believed in my own stories and believed in, the narrative that I wanted to sell. It wasn't until that point that the company really started to take off.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're right. You got to believe. I mean, if you don't believe, nobody else is going to believe at all. And here's the crazy part of that you just said. It took time.
Hmm.
So one of the definitely the keys to telling great stories is you got to put the time in. You got to work
Hmm.
on them. And I think that's where you headed. And isn't that where we headed, Lawrence? I don't know if that
Yeah.
was the next question or not, but I just know you got to put the time in. I didn't stand up on the stage and tell a great story the first time. Here's the crazy part. Yes, I always tell, I don't try to deny that I am an energetic, naturally engaging person, which means even when I'm telling the story offline or me and my friends are hanging out, if I feel like talking that day and I start, I've gotten lazy since I get paid to speak. Since I get paid to speak, I don't talk as much offline as I used to. And I'm a little stingy with my words now. But anyway, if I start telling stories, my natural personality comes out. But please do not confuse natural ability with thinking about planning out and working on your stories over and over and over again until you start telling them in the best manner.
Yeah, and that practice is key. And really, when it comes to anything with entrepreneurship, and you'll hear that as being the general or a general theme of great pro speakers is the importance of practice. Whether you're talking about digital marketing, crafting your marketing message, or you're
Yeah,
talking about even the operational aspect of running a company, running a business.
right.
Just practice, practice, practice. I think that goes a long way. Not in the Allen Iverson, we talking about practice. No, but
Yeah,
yeah, we talking
practice.
about practice. You got
Right.
to
We talking about
practice.
practice.
Right,
We
right.
are.
More.
And one other thing, Lawrence, uh, point of view. And we didn't even write this down. This just came to me just now. So point of view in your story will help you make a lot of money. And what I mean
Hmm.
by that is one of the best ways to help make sure your story is relatable to different audiences is based on the point of view from which you tell your story. So if I'm
Hmm.
standing up in front of the room and I'm talking to all teens, then I want to tell my story from the point of view of a 24-year-old that was worried about life and made some mistakes, and then I got to go raise a teenager. But if I'm talking to all parents, then I'm going to tell my story from the point of view of my mom and me trying to help take care of a young person and raise him up to be a successful adult, because that's more of a parent point of view. If I'm talking to teachers, then I'm talking more from a mentor type point of view. I'm framing my story around there. If I'm talking to employers, and I'm talking to the point of view of about being able to relate from one generation to another generation and getting a young person to adopt successful habits. So I can take the same story, and so can you, and just shifting the point of view slightly, make your story all of a sudden relatable to a totally different audience.
Yeah, and one company that does that really well, and we talked about this, is Disney,
Yeah, that's
right?
my motto right there.
Yeah, yeah. Disney does that very well because if you look at a lot of their movies, we were talking about the movie Moana,
Mhm,
or if you even talk about Pixar with Toy Story or whatever.
mhm.
Toy Story 3 is one of my favorite movies. It
Yeah.
actually made me cry at the end, right?
Oh man. Okay. That's all
Yeah,
right.
right. But how can you have something that relates to the kids, but and yet at the same time also relate to the parents as well who are watching it.
Yeah, yeah, I'm big on that. I like to know who's in the audience, who's going to be there, and then I am determined to the core of my story or the core of my entire presentation is definitely going to be targeted to the part of the audience that's the biggest, the most that's in there, and who I'm getting paid to talk to. So if I'm coming in and I'm talking to a school, or I'm at a conference for young people, obviously it's going to be mostly teens and young professionals or college students or somebody like that there. But there are going to be a ton of educators. There's going to be parents in the room. There's going to be advisors. There's going to be mentors. There's going to be, I've seen bus drivers. Look up and there's 30, 40 buses there. So I got 30 bus drivers sitting in there, And so what I've discovered is Disney is very good. When they make movies, there's little subtle things in there, little hint here, little things. So that's for this side of the audience so that the other people, other than just the children, can get some enjoyment and some messages out of there. As a matter of fact, some things might go flying over their head. So when you tell your story, if you look up and you see various audiences or various age groups in there as well, make sure you slide a few things in there that will help bridge everything together so that you're not having any part of your audience sit there that's completely not engaged.
Right, yeah. And I think that's really important, to make that happen. It can be a little challenging. You have to really think about your stories to be able to connect to those audience at the same time.
Acknowledge them. Sometimes you can just acknowledge them. Look, you know what? I'm talking to my young folks here, but I know all of y'all older people in the room understand exactly what I'm talking about. Work with me. Right. And something as simple as that will bring them in and make them say, you know what? Okay, this guy's acknowledging us. We hear a story, we relate to it, and we understand he's still trying to give us something, even though it's mainly for a different group or something like that.
Right. So, by the way, everybody, I'm Lawrence Watkins. I'm here with Al Duncan. We're the co-founders of Great Pro Speakers, where we teach you the truth about professional speaking. Today, we're talking about how to tell money-making stories. Whether you're talking about, we're coming from the perspective of a professional speaker. Mm-hmm. However, at the same time, this could be used for anything. If you're going out there raising VC money, venture capital, if you're going to try to find a new job or whatever it may be, how do you go about telling those stories that relate to your audience, but then also get them to take action?
Yep.
So, Al, I have one more question for you today.
Okay.
We talked a lot about, creating the story, crafting the story, why we should have good stories, excuse me. Mm-hmm. How do you actually know if your story is any good?
Oh, well, I mean, if you're a professional speaker, you know if you have a good story. If nobody is coming to the back of the room to buy your products, or nobody is booking you for extra gigs. In other words, I had a gig. Did I get any spinoff business? I had a gig that somebody called me a couple months later, or I had a gig that 10 people sign up for my newsletter. Did 30, 40, 50 people follow me on Twitter? Did they go check me out on social media? And are they spending money with me and staying connected with me and engaging with me? If you don't see that happen, then my thing is normally is one or two things going on. Either A, your presentation needs some work, okay, or your stories are not engaged. They're not delivering the right content and information that's making people want to be a part of you. When I say sell and drive them to action, that is, we want people to use what you're teaching them, and we want them to jump into your sales funnel. They could buy a book. They could buy an audio program. They could get some coaching services from you. They could book you for another speaking engagement, or they could do something as simple as say, you know what? I just want to hear what else you got to say. I'm going to sign up for your newsletter. I'm going to go check you out on Facebook or whatever. And so I'm going to catch you on LinkedIn. I get so many people now connect with me on LinkedIn because they want to network with me professionally, which is clearly showing that something, you don't know me. You just heard me speak, and all of a sudden you want to add me to your LinkedIn network, and now we're going to network as professionals. Clearly something I said fit one of those things that lowered your resistance, that helped you to want to connect with me. So the true litmus test of whether or not your stories are working for professional speakers, the bottom line is are you selling, and are you moving people to action? If you're not doing those two things, then even if your presentation is effective, you might do very well getting some laughs. I'm always getting laughs out of the audience. That does not mean I drove them to action or I got some sales out of it. And to me, as a professional speaker, considering that you're trying to build your business to get more gigs, if you're not doing those two things, then I believe that your stories need some work. Not get rid of them, just let's tweak them. Let's put some more language in there. Let's recraft them a little bit.
And it's always going to be tweaking and practicing
all day long.
Until you find that perfect story that's going to generate a lot of your income. So
that's right. I agree.
All right, Al.
That's what comedians say. They say great material is not written, it's rewritten.
Right. And you see material. I mean, you see comedians do this the best, actually, all the time they're getting in front of live audiences. They may have given their bit, their comedy routine, 50 times before Netflix or HBO comes and records that presentation, or records that audience routine, or the routine
usually happens at the end of the tour. So if you're on a 100-city tour, they're doing the live movie on the last city. And there's a reason for that, it's because by then I've got everything worked out. So that's when I want to record it,
Yeah, exactly. In professional speaking, it's the same.
You ever notice that? I noticed that with interviews on the day. So if I'm watching
Mhm.
Sports Center or watching the channel, I'll see somebody, you know how guys are. We turn on Sports Center, the same thing might run over and over for like 4 or
Yeah.
5 hours. They just sitting there watching the same thing. So I'll see somebody interviewing early in the morning on one show, and they're going to make their way through all the shows, and they say
Mhm.
similar things. And normally by the end of the third or fourth show, they've really got it down how
Mhm.
he or she wanted to come across.
Right. So, all right, guys. Well,
Yeah.
get out there and start telling your own money-making stories.
That's right.
If you want to know more about us, and if you like this video, please make sure you like it. If you want to know more about what we offer, head over to www.greatprospeakers.com. Like I said, our purpose is to teach you the truth about professional speaking. I've ran a speakers bureau for about 12 years now. Al's been a professional speaker for how long? How long has it been now? 15, 20
17
years?
years now, man.
17 years.
Yep.
17 years. So that's almost 30 years of combined knowledge regarding the speaking industry on this call today. So head over to greatprospeakers.com and you can sign up for a 1 month free trial. And we also have our Off to a Great Start program to really get you started, to get you jump started if professional speaking, if you think that's something that you may want to do to generate income and really just to impact and shape the world. So
yes, I agree with that. And you know, at greatprospeakers.com, when Lawrence says we want to give you the truth, but we also we give a lot of information. I'll give you an example right now. You know what? I'm gonna let you go, but I'll give you one more last tip about telling a great story. If this you want to make money, write this one down. Product placement. Telling your story. Always tell a story about how somebody else used your book, or somebody else booked you for a gig, or at your last presentation somebody said this about you. Because what that does is it helps to place your products and your services in your story without it sounding like you sell it. That right there will make people very inquisitive, and it will drive them to your table, and I'll drive them to your website to find out how can we do business with you as well. Boom, bonus tip. There you go.
Excellent. So Al Duncan dropping nuggets. So
yeah.
That's right. So on behalf of Al Duncan, I'm Lawrence Watkins. Thanks for tuning in today. Be well, be safe, and be blessed.
Yep.
All right. Bye-bye.